and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel later on. A recording started, Robert? Yeah. Thank you. Can I request phones put to silent mode or switched off if you need to do a phone call? That's okay. Just discreetly sneak out, do your phone call and come back again. We'll call for the Sederant apologies, and it's Aileen Anderson.
Good morning, members. Can I get you to confirm your attendance when I call your name, please? Councillor Mabin.
Present.
Councillor Cogley.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Canning. Councillor McFadden. Councillor Richardson. Councillor Sangster.
Here, good morning.
Councillor Todd.
Yep.
Councillor McGregor.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Lennox. Councillor Kyle.
Present.
Councillor Hogg.
Here, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Chair's remarks. We welcome to the meeting as an observer Mohammed Andy Kashalakandi. I hope I got that right. Welcome to East Ayrshire Council and the best of luck in your new role. And recently appointed to the post Senior Auditor with Internal Audit. And Paul Brown is recently appointed as Chief Internal Auditor from North Ayrshire Council. And that's with regards to the Corporate Fraud Progress Report. So welcome to Paul Brown as well. We'll go to the next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. David Mitchell, take us through that.
As always, Chair, it's really a matter for any members if they have any particular interests in relation to any items on the agenda. The nature of them are such that may well not be the case, but clearly the purpose of that paragraph or this item is for members just to pause and confirm that or confirm if they have any interest. These are all quite high level papers, so there's nothing I would anticipate, but members have the knowledge.
Thank you, David. I'd like to members any declarations of interest at this time. I'll take that as a no. Thank you. We'll move on to the minutes, previous minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of October. And ask for approval as correct record. Elected members, are you happy with the previous minutes? No objections. We'll take that as approval of the correct record. And any matters arising from the previous minutes, 23rd October? No. Okay, thank you. At this stage, I will remind officers who will be presenting reports. They've been issued well in advance of today's meeting. Members have had the opportunity to read the reports beforehand. Therefore, officers should keep presentations brief and focused on the main points. Thank you. The first report we've got today is item 3 in the agenda, East Ayrshire Performs Summary Report. That's pages 12 to 65 on your papers, members. And the overview, I think we're starting with Colin Hastings. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this report is the second East Ayrshire Performs Report of the year, continuing in the updated format that was introduced previously to Governance Scrutiny for the Q1 report in September. The report provides members with performance and monitoring information for Q2 as at the 30th of September this year across the areas of revenue, capital, workforce and digital. I will take you through the summary detail of the revenue section before colleagues then brief you on the following sections. The recommendations of Cabinet are noted at paragraph 2, with members of Governance Scrutiny asked to note the contents of the report. Paragraph 5 of the main report indicates that the council-wide overspend position is projected to be £10.525 million. This position includes a net overspend of £500,000 in relation to council tax collection and council tax reduction position, which is managed centrally out with the main service areas. The page on screen details the overall position for all main service areas. On the left-hand side, we can see here that at Q2, the overall position is projected as an overspend of £10.025 million. This is a significant increase from the position at Q1 of £8.5 million and is primarily in relation to older people services within the Health and Social Care Partnership. While most other areas are achieving some stability or improved financial position from Q1, the continuing pressure within the social care service remains. On the right-hand side, we can see that almost £200 million of the total projected expenditure has been spent by the 30th of September, with the largest portion of that in relation to staffing costs. At the bottom on the right-hand side, we see a detailed breakdown of the overall net variance of £10.025 million, broken down by expenditure category. We can see that the vast majority of the overspend relates to third-party payments, centrally held savings and transport costs, reflecting particularly the areas of pressure within the Health and Social Care Partnership and in relation to education transport. So moving on to some more detail within the services, beginning with education. Beginning with education, we can see that £74.7 million has been spent by September, 52% of the overall anticipated spend, with the vast majority in relation to staffing costs. The service was projecting an overspend position of £985,000 at Q2, an improved position from that noted at Q1 of approximately £1 million. The majority of this improvement relates to an anticipated cost reduction of £700,000 following the review and initial implementation of the alternative school transport policy. Pressures will, however, remain in this relation to this area this year, with pressures also continuing in relation to school absence costs and in relation to probationers. The service is, however, continuing to achieve savings in relation to early years provision following the implementation of the best value review in this area last year, and this is reflected in the projected underspends on employee costs and third-party costs in the chart at the bottom right-hand corner of the page. Moving on to the remaining services within education, within Chief Executive, a spend at September of £13.4 million is noted, with an overall underspend of £1.062 million anticipated at the year end, a slight increase from Q1. That saving is spread across all service areas, being achieved through savings on employee costs. As these service areas progress onwards with service redesigns and additional income recovery. The finance and digital service area is anticipated to underspend by £235,000, with savings in relation to employee costs, partly offset by pressures in relation to income recovery and IT licence requirements. The governance service is anticipated to be £473,000 underspent as a result of projected levels of income recovery for building warrant and planning fees. And people and culture is also anticipated to underspend as a result of the anticipated fee income generated from salary sacrifice schemes. Moving on to communities and economy, a broadly stable position continues for the services as a collective at Q2, having spent £47.3 million by September, but projecting to be broadly online overall. A small underspend anticipated of £177,000. However, individually, pressure continues to be seen within the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and within housing and communities, being supported primarily by savings within central management support, which reflects management actions undertaken as part of Communities and Economy's previous budget recovery plan to maintain collective control of the budget position. The Ayrshire Roads Alliance is anticipated to overspend this year by £881,000, primarily as a result of the cost of mainstream school transport costs and roads maintenance contractor costs, as well as lower levels of parking income recovery than previously anticipated. Housing and communities are projected to be £322,000 over budget this year, moving from a previously anticipated underspend position of £202,000 at Q1, with pressures within greener communities and cleaner communities resulting in the movement. This position takes account of £2 million of extended producer responsibility funding in the current year to support the implementation of the waste management review, acknowledging also that the model being implemented following review required financial support in initial years before financial benefits would be recognised. Following on now to the position for health and social care, this remains singularly the largest continuing financial challenge for the Council, as the management of the Health and Social Care Partnership continues to tackle the levels of demand for service provision while implementing previously planned actions to address the pressure. The financial position, while significant, is representative of the challenge being evidenced nationally across all IGIBs in relation to the need and cost of social care provision. The Director of Health and Social Care Partnership has advised that the social care service is anticipated to outturn by 10.279 million over budget, an increased overspend position of 2.4 million higher than previously recognised at Q1. This movement primarily relates to the provision of community care services, which has moved from a £5.3 million overspend to an £8 million overspend, primarily in relation to older people services and learning disabilities. Savings targets of £2.5 million previously anticipated to be achieved have, following discussion with senior health and social care management, been determined as unlikely to be recognised under current plans, with efficiencies being consumed by the increasing level of demand within the service. Additionally, while pressure continues in relation to the outwith placement budget, an improved position is noted with a reduction in the projected overspend from 921,000 to 581,000, with the number of placements reducing from 19 to 17, although recognition is made that this can be a very fluid area. Children and Family Services continue to offset some of the pressure elsewhere with a projected underspend of £580,000. If we move on to the housing revenue account, where we can see that it is anticipated to underspend by £415,000 at Q2, the graphic on the left of the page shows a balanced position overall, recognising that an underspend in relation to the HRA must remain within it for use in supporting tenants in future years. The position has moved since Q1, previously a £1.8 million underspend, with the service taking the opportunity to increase the level of planned spend on CFCR plan maintenance. This has been possible due to the favourable position arising from windfall savings on employee costs from the reduction in employer superannuation rate to 6.5% this year, which the HRA is able to retain. This can be seen in the top variance on the graphic on the bottom right side of the page. Next is the Leisure Trust, which continues to anticipate an online position overall at the year end, as was the case at Q1. The graphic on the left-hand side of the page details the £8.65 million management fee that the Council provides the Leisure Trust with for management of services, whilst on the right we can see at the top a breakdown of the service areas that the management fee is spent on. And on the bottom right, details of some of the variances within each of the areas, both areas of pressure and the countering areas of saving which support these in the current year. If I move on to central services, these are functional budget areas that are not assigned to individual service areas, as they relate more to the corporate functioning of the Council as a whole. There are two areas of note that I would address here. The first is the position in relation to housing and council tax benefit. A £900,000 overspend continues to be anticipated in relation to council tax reduction support, recognising that the level of entitlement for support to members of our community is in excess of the funding we receive, and that the Council must find funding elsewhere to support this. The second relates to the reduced pension contribution for employers' superannuation for 25-26. On the right-hand side, we make note that the saving from this remains expected to be £12 million this year, and will, as previously approved, be earmarked to support the Early Intervention and Prevention Fund. It is not shown as an underspend at Q2 within the figures in order to not obscure the Council financial position overall, but has been highlighted for note. Moving on to the last page, I would just note that the summary table at the end of the revenue section, which provides a cumulative position on all the main service areas and the Council funding which supports them, recognising the full Council overspend position at £10.525 million. Finally, members, in the main covering report, if I can draw your attention to the financial resilience indicators noted at paragraph 20. These are indicators we report annually following the audit of the accounts to show a snapshot health check of the continuing financial sustainability of the Council, focusing on availability of resources and level of Council indebtedness. I would note that while the level of usable and earmarked reserves have increased both in pound and percentage terms, this is mainly due to the accounting treatment for the Early Intervention and Prevention Fund. I would also note that while our unallocated reserves remain within our minimum reserve policy level of 2%, they are at the lowest they have been in some time at £8.28 million. Additionally, in broad terms, the cost of financing the General Fund and HRA capital programmes is 6% and 19 pence for every pound of related funding received. So that represents the revenue position at Q2 for the Council. At that point, I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Colin. I think I'll go first before I open it out to the floor. The one that set alarm bells ringing for me was in paragraph 13, health and social care, which relates to your further on in your report, page 30. 116 estimated budget, but the spend projected is 126. We're about 10 million overspend, about 10%. Overspend. What's the plans? What do we do now? How are we going to fix this? How do we claw this back? Now we're looking at even more drastic cuts to social care, and how's that going to hit people on the front line? Because the elected members are going to have to be facing this if there's cuts to care.
I think to you, Chair, on behalf of Colin, I think to be fair, that's not one Colin's able to answer alone. Members may be aware there was a special IJB meeting yesterday at which the IJB formally agreed to proceed to issue a direction to the Council. That paper will be reported to Council next week, will be included in the agenda and brought to members for deliberation. I think the question you pose would be better answered at that point by those colleagues responsible for running the services and bringing the budget back into line. I think suffice to say at this moment there are no easy answers that Colin or anyone else could provide, but in terms of process, it's coming to Council next week with the direction that the Council now look at certain areas, specified areas within the direction, and come to a view on how the 10 million can be recovered. So that thorny problem is coming to Council next week, and there will be more detail provided at that time. But to be fair to Colin, it's not necessarily detail he will have at the moment.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll deal with it full Council next week, see what questions we get and replies. Thank you. I'll open it up to other questions. Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just with regards to page 13, paragraph 8 on education, I'm just looking at the additional pay costs in terms of probationers. Can I get a wee bit of clarity in that? Because I would have thought that probationers would have saved us money. Am I right? No?
Just to kind of come back in on that, this is more about a funding issue than an actual payment issue. What we get is a level of funding for probationers, and that can vary per each individual teacher as to the level of funding we get for that, depending on the nature of the subject matter or that sort of almost bidding process between individual authorities as to how much that authority is willing to accept in relation to payment for it. So it's not so much about actually the payment or the payment that the probationer receives, it's about the shortfall in funding. So we've essentially taken on more probationers than we actually have funding for in order to fill the roles that we need. So again, if Linda's got anything else to add, but it's more a funding issue than a payment issue.
Oh, thanks so much for that clarity. I do appreciate that. I've got another question, if that's okay, and I don't know if this needs to come to full Council. It's just regarding on page 31, obviously the projected overspend for older services. I'm just wondering if we're able to drill down on that a wee bit, because that kind of looks like it's cheaper to have people in a nursing home or a residential home than it is to look after them in their own house. Now, I want to be clear on this. I am not an advocate of putting people into nursing homes. I think they should stay in their own home for as long as they're able. But I'm just wondering if we could drill down a wee bit in that, or maybe David can advise, is that something we bring up again at full Council following the IJB yesterday? Thank you.
I thought the question related to probationers, is that not teachers?
No, I've asked us a question since then.
All right, sorry.
I was asking about on page 31 about the older services is projected to overspend, but looking at the figures, it looks like it might be cheaper to have older people in a nursing or residential home rather than keeping them at home. And I'm just wondering, is that something we could discuss here, or is it something for full Council next week?
It may well be. I see Eric's here. It may well be Eric could give a general indication in response to that. I'm just conscious of the for obvious reasons, given that the challenge that we identified could require some far-reaching judgments and decisions. The point being, the paper yesterday was a pink paper for that reason, in case there's any impacts that would require staff consultations. So it's hard to know where the answer might go, whether we might stray into the areas we shouldn't go. But I think with that caveat, that Eric could probably give some kind of high-level clarification in the comparison between the two sets of costs.
Yeah, I suppose it's policy direction, as you said, Councillor Sangster, in relation to maintaining people at home as much as possible. So about 1,200 people are maintained at home on any one day, and we have about 650 people supported in care homes in East Ayrshire. Policy direction is one thing, and our balance of care has consistently shifted towards supporting more people at home, and you can see that in the statutory performance indicators that come to governance and scrutiny. More generally, it's based on individual assessed need and what's the best place and what's the best setting for the individual to be supported in. The balance always being to try and support people at home as much as possible. And the cost effectiveness falls out of what your balance of care looks like.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Eric, for that reply. Echo. And thank you, Councillor Sangster, for the question. And if just a reminder, elected members, if we follow Councillor Sangster's very good example, tell us the page and the paragraph you're referring to in the report so we can all follow. Councillor Richardson online. Councillor Richardson, you had your hand up. Have you changed your mind?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Maben. Just forgot to take the mic off of the mic off there. Peter, it's just really coming back to the point that you made, or asking a wee bit more information of David after the very good point that you made there, because obviously, as elected members, we're seeing that the budget that East Ayrshire setting aside for the IJB continually not being enough, and then at the end of a financial year, the council having to make up, I think it was 6 million previously, it now looks as if it might be 10. But my question is, obviously, care at home for our infirm and elderly, etc., it's probably one of the most important things that the council does. It's probably one of our priorities, if you like, because, again, after what Councillor Sangster said, keeping people in their own home rather than putting them into old people's homes, that's a very, very important thing to my mind, giving them a wee bit of dignity, allowing them to stay at home, maybe having a home worker going in every day to make sure they're okay, maybe make them a bit of lunch. But I think it's a brilliant service, just making sure that our infirm and elderly can stay in their own properties as long as they possibly can. But it's obviously costing more and more money, and there's more and more people requiring that service, so demand's going up. So my question is, what can the council do about that at the higher level? Are we, as East Ayrshire Council, able to go direct? If Cabinet makes the decision, wait a minute, this service isn't going to get any cheaper, it's a service we must provide, therefore, can we make representations direct to the Scottish Government to say, look, we need more money for this? Or can local authorities as a group go through COSLA and say to the Scottish Government, look, we need more money. Basically, this is one of the most important services we offer as local authorities. We're not getting enough money in order to provide the service. That's probably a question for David. How does it work, David? How can we make representations to the Scottish Government to say, hey guys, we need more money for this?
The short answer is, understand from the Leader of the Council's update to Cabinet yesterday and at the IJB that COSLA agreed last Friday that they would, as a group, be writing to Scottish Government looking for more money. Obviously, if more money is made available, that'll be the easy solution. But I think we have to proceed on the basis there may not be and not likely to be any more money. And therefore, the mission for every local authority is to live within the budget allocated to it, and in making those decisions to then how allocate it to the different services, all of which are of importance. So the short answer is COSLA has made that decision, and that request will be made to Scottish Government. But I don't think there'll be a local authority in Scotland that will be banking on a positive response, and we therefore need to hope for the best but plan for the worst.
Thanks for that response, David. I'm really pleased to hear that that representation to Holyrood has already or is going to be made. That's what I wanted to hear. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Have we any more questions or comments on the first part of the overview and the revenue part for Colin before we move on to the next bit? The next part we're going to is capital, which is Simon Bell. Simon's not here. Okay, Andrew, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Simon's unwell today, so I'll cover it. Morning, members. In terms of the capital update, I won't go into too much detail in terms of the report. Obviously, you can access that, and obviously we'll drill down into all the detail. I'll just give a kind of high-level summary and then kind of bring out some highlights from the report. I think obviously the summary page does highlight obviously the overall commitments and projections across the different areas and where we anticipate to be at the end of the year. The sort of speedometer at the top probably it's the obvious issue to pick up within this part of the report. Clearly, we've spent about £25 million so far, recognising this as period 2 up until September. So there's still significant expenditure anticipated. There's a number of projects that quite significant projects that are obviously now on site, which are spending significant money on a monthly basis. We've got the Palace Theatre, we've got the Moorfield site in particular, which is quite a considerable investment, and there's a number of areas, including the waste review and housing investment, that continue to spend funding over the next couple of months as well. Within the report, the main body of the report, or the summary report, it also highlights some adjustments that we're making in terms of reprofiling of some of the budget as well. And that's obviously what's highlighted in that we kind of gap between £107 and £115 million, as there are a few projects that we don't anticipate to spend what we had initially anticipated this year, and that budget will be rolled forward into next year. As I said, the main structure of the report does highlight the different service areas, and obviously I won't go into the detail of that at the moment, but just to kind of highlight a number of the projects that we've kind of been progressing. So starting with the completed projects, Kilmarnock multi-storey car park site, final demolition and landscaping works were complete in November, following the slight delay due to the decommissioning of existing substation on site. Some good news for St Sophia's Primary School, which was completed in the summer, which was highly commended in the recent Built Environment Accelerator to Zero Awards. There's approximately £50 million of construction contracts currently on site. Palace Theatre Grand Hall, as part of Cultural Kilmarnock, commenced in August with the £20 million worth of levelling up fund, with work continue to be phased over the next 2 years. Initial works have included formation of a traffic management, exterior hoarding and internal asbestos removal. First phase of infrastructure work at Ayrshire Engineering Park and Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor, which are obviously combined Moorfield site, again commenced on site in October, and those infrastructure works anticipated to take about a year, and we continue to develop the designs for the Centre of Excellence and the remaining industrial units that will form that site. Galston Library and Office Works refurbishment and extend the former Galston Chambers is now largely complete, with some minor snaggings and kind kind of, I suppose, the internal furniture and setup has now been complete. And again, that we anticipate there'll be an opening of that early in the new year. Comores Primary School works to replace the existing dining room and kitchen, started on site in the last couple of weeks. And again, that's anticipated to be completed in early 2027. Number of projects are still at a detailed design stage. Student Academy would be the next one we anticipate will be out to tender, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, with an early award next year. And again, works would be on site there between spring 26 and spring 27. We've just awarded a contract for Willowbank to construct a new modular classroom where the existing garage is at the back. And again, works anticipated to start on site there early 2026. It is a modular unit, so we anticipate that work will be completed by Easter next year. In terms of earlier design stages, Doon Valley Community Campus, revised proposals for the refurbishment extension to the existing school have now been prepared, and the stakeholders consultation is ongoing. Detailed designs for the first phase of improvements to the existing leisure centre are currently being developed, with works anticipated to start on site early next year. Again, probably this will have a kind of 4-year staged development, which will include internal works, extension, demolition of part of the buildings, and then further landscaping following that. That's kind of the key highlights I wanted to kind of cover, Chair, so happy to take any questions on these projects or any other projects in the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go Councillor Cogley and then Councillor Sangster.
Andrew, thanks very much for the report, and really just an acknowledgement of the 2 projects in the Urban Valley, St Sophia's Primary School and the library, the town chambers. And great to have the children back in St Sophia's, and as far as the town chambers is concerned, that's a fantastic facelift to the community. So it is really appreciated that those 2 projects have gone ahead. And it's, I think, one of these scenarios where you build a bonfire, people come, because as a result of the investment, certainly in the town chambers, yes, St Sophia's too, but marginally less so. But certainly as far as the town chambers is concerned, we've seen significant private investment very, very close by, which certainly in relation to one of those investments was primarily because there was a recognition that Galston had been recognised as a site for development, for investment, and the private money then followed. So I'm referring, of course, to the Balmoral Knitwear. So it really is greatly appreciated that that investment has been made. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. We'll go to Councillor Sangster and then we'll go online to Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just a couple of comments rather than questions. I'm very much somebody who likes to give credit where it's due. So I really want to say thank you for particularly Willowbank. We now look like the modular unit's going to be there come Easter. I think that's fantastic, and hopefully that will take a wee bit of the strain off the kind of overcrowding issue that we have there. I also had the pleasure of visiting Cross House with Linda Macaulay-Griffiths the other day, and that supported learning centre there is just an amazing space. I don't quite know how you've managed to do it in that space, in that, within that short time frame. But what I seen was some very, very happy, very settled children, in a really good, bright space, with amazing staff who are doing fantastic work there. So, absolute credit where it's due. Well done to everybody involved in that particular project. Thank you.
Andrew or Linda, you want to come back in on that? You okay?
Maybe just to come in and thank Councillor Sangster for the comments. I think it was great to see eyes on in terms of the additional resource for the new intake at the Cross House Communication Centre to really just to reinforce. I'll pass those thanks on to all the officers involved.
Thank you. We'll go Councillor McGregor online and then Councillor Todd.
Thanks very much, Chair. Andrew, thanks for the update. I did have a question initially about timescales for the town chambers in Galston, but you alluded to that in your comments, so thank you. So really just to follow on a couple of comments from the things that Councillor Cogley alluded to. St Sophia's, fantastic to see the kids back in there. It's quite a, I don't know if it's unique, but it's certainly a very special type of infrastructure project that we've got there. I'm looking forward to seeing it on Saturday in my other guys' Christmas Fair, Father Christmas. With regards to the town chamber, I don't think we can underestimate just how big an impact that's had on Galston and the wider Irvine Valley. And with the Balmoral Mill that Councillor Cogley mentioned, and with the new Loudon Retail Park opening, and hopefully a focus on what the Irvine Valley communities can offer, it really is worth noting, and really it's one of those opportunities where I think credit has to be given. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Santa. We'll go to Councillor Todd online, please.
Thanks, convener. Page 49, it's to ask Andrew, and maybe you're the wrong person, Andrew, just getting asked to fill in, but in terms of the proposed charging to electric vehicles that was announced in the budget, in terms of our plan for the investment in our fleet, will this affect our plans in any way? And also, because there'll be an increased cost, obviously, but also in terms of that cost, 3 pence per mile that's been proposed, will that fall on the department that in effect rents the vehicles from transport, or will it be a package that transport will pay for the cost of these vehicles? Thanks.
I think Colin's going to come in with this one if it's a budget issue.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to kind of sort of obviously come back, the implications of the increase is obviously something that will have to be considered by departments and by services going forward about the vehicles and the transport and that they use, and we would obviously sort of kind of build the implications of that in. In terms of answering your question about where the sort of costs of that lie, the answer is yes, that it would lie with the services. Ultimately, the fuel costs for transport lie with each individual service area, so any increase on that cost, whether it be a normal fuel increase or an EV increase, will ultimately lie with the services to pick that up, and that's something that we would have to factor into the budget process.
Thank you. Andrew, coming back.
Maybe just the wider point in terms of that fleet investment. Obviously, the climate change report's also on the agenda today, and there's clearly been a number of decisions the council's had to take to consider the financial as well as the climate impact of our fleet. Clearly, EV cars can still be a positive financial decision in certain circumstances, and again, I suppose the other parts of where government agenda is moving to try and ensure that I suppose the innovation around net zero transport continues to be invested in as well. So I think there's probably a double-edged element of this as we see things going forward, but clearly an area that we do need to continue to monitor.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Councillor Todd, you okay with that reply? Okay. June, would you want then? Councillor Kyle.
Thank you. Glacier Street. Extent work required to be retendered due to incorrect specifications. What's happening? Because this has been going on for years and it's an absolute mess. Any dates that will be completed? Sorry.
Sorry, is there a page reference or a paragraph reference we're talking about?
Say work required to be retendered due to incorrect specifications. I don't know if you have any more information or clarity regarding that.
There's so obviously the works that have happened in terms of, so we've finished the building works in terms of the pub and the building that obviously we need to support. So that work's obviously been completed. In terms of the car park, then there's a couple of things in there, obviously, in terms of the disabled spaces and the sort of, I suppose, the connection onto Glazenock Street. That's just, it's been reviewed basically, and obviously it's been identified that obviously the specification and what we needed to do could be improved, and obviously that work's then been done. We also at Cabinet yesterday agreed some investment around the Workers' Memorial, and again we would be looking at that site to incorporate that into that area as well, basically. So again, there's a couple of things moving at kind of concurrently that we just need to kind of manage. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can try one myself, page 16, paragraphs 22, 23 about Drungan Primary School. The roof refurbishment is complete, but now there's something else happening. There's unforeseen issues with the roof structure. So we need to get contractors back in, and that's additional cost, or that's going to take a wee bit longer now. Can you clarify that for us, please?
So just in terms of us reporting into East Ayrshire Performs, although the general performance is in the main reports, where there's a contract that we've spent more than 10% on, then we have to report that back to Cabinet, basically. So what we would do in this example is obviously the work specification that we put out to tender included a scope of works that we anticipated would be sufficient to deal with the project, and during that works additional issues were uncovered. Obviously it talks about, obviously once you start to take the roof layers off, then the actual roof deck needed a bit more work than we anticipated. So that work then was instructed, and the work's completed, but because the overall project cost was more than the 10%, then we'll come back to members just to confirm that position. Obviously, we've got the component renewal budget, which has got a number of projects, and we will manage, obviously, those additional costs within the overall programme, which might mean other things we'll delay and pick up in future year budgets.
All right, thank you. Any more questions on the capital part of East Ayrshire Performs? Or comments? No one online. Right, thank you, Andrew. We'll move on to the next part, which is the workforce part of East Ayrshire Performs. That's Amanda Lowe.
Thanks, Chair, and morning members. It's like Andrew before me, I don't intend to go through every page in detail because obviously members have the opportunity and give a chance to ask any questions, but I'll just pull out a few points. So on the first slide on the left-hand side is our headcount, and we're headcount and FTE. I'm noting that since the same time last year, there's been an overall decrease of 249 employees, and the FTEs decreased by 238.6. On the right-hand side of this slide shows our young employees under 30, which shows that at September 2025, there was 989, with 108 of these being our young people in apprenticeships, which equates to 10.9%. The overall young employees under 30 at September is an increase of 2.9% since last year, and it equates to our overall workforce of 15.5%. On this slide shows our trainees. through jobs and training, there's a slight decrease in this quarter of 6, but that's due to a number of posts going through the recruitment process and a number of individuals currently awaiting in their pre-employment checks. This slide shows the vacancies. On the left-hand side, the number of posts advertised, which has decreased in this period by 67. And the right-hand side shows the number of new employees to the council, which is an increase. It's 189 starting, which is an increase of 108. Both of these are linked with the academic year for schools when we recruit and new employees starting. The number of leavers are shown in the next slide, which is a total of 182 for this period, which is at the exact same for the previous quarter, with 82 of them leaving for resignations being the highest number. Moving on to absence, within the periods 1 to 6, the average, there were 6,383 instances of absence over the period, with over 37,000 working days lost. With the absence length, the graphs show the split between short-term and long-term absence. Both of these have been looked at as part of our policy review, which we've taken back to Cabinet in the first quarter of next year, looking at how we tighten up short-term absence, in particular persistent short-term absence, and our long-term absence. There is an action plan in place for each of these cases. With regard to absence reasons, the top 5 absence reasons remain the same for this year as they were at the same period last year, with reductions in the 3 stress cases reasons and slight increase in musculoskeletal. This was up to the period end of September. For the 1st October, we started our early intervention for musculoskeletal, so hopefully we'll see an improvement in that and a quite significant increase in operations recovery. Come back. You'll also see at the bottom of that page, we've grouped together all 3 stress reasons: personal, work-related and work-related and personal. And within these 3, there's been a decrease of 1,755 days. So in addition to the policy review going to Cabinet, folk know we've got the support and attendance and wellbeing team in place. There'll be a full report going in the first quarter as well, with an update of the work that's been done there and the asks that came up at Council at the end of October, partly of the benchmarking with more public sector and private sector as well. I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Cogley first.
Amanda, thanks very much. And I've questions relating to 3 different areas. First of all, in relation to our employment of people under the age of 30, do we have a set target as to the numbers that we will be looking for? And does that include East Ayrshire Leisure? Because I would imagine there will be quite a lot of young people who are going straight from school or from college into outdoor type jobs with East Ayrshire Leisure. So that's my first question. I'm really pleased to see the percentage increasing, albeit not by a huge amount, but I'm really pleased to see that it's increasing. So that's my first question. In relation to recruitment, as far as outdoor amenities is concerned, it seems to me that every year we've had problems recruiting people. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what we're going to be doing early in the new year in terms of getting our seasonal recruitment perhaps a little bit more effective than we have done in the past. And in relation to absence, it would be remiss of me not to mention absence. If you could give us an update on what we're doing with short-term absence. I'm completely familiar with everything that we're doing on long-term absence, and I think we've made great inroads there, but an update on short-term absence would be appreciated. Thank you.
You, Chair. Right, okay, starting at question 1, there isn't a set target, a number. It's just that bit of it increasing and continuing to increase, being very aware that we have an ageing workforce and about succession planning and bringing that in, and obviously our jobs and training supporting that. We don't cover the Leisure Trust in here because they are a separate organisation, so this is only the East Ayrshire Council employees, not the Leisure Trust employees. Question 2, the seasonal recruitment, I would need to go back to the service, to Blair, to get that information about what they're doing. I don't think he's here today, but I can do that and send a reply offline. In relation to the short-term absence, we've been doing a lot of work trying to analyse and look at patterns, working out where folk are going off, if it's Mondays, Fridays, if it's same reasons, different reasons, things like that. So we've been doing a lot of analysis, and we've had a support for the graduate intern within internal audit, who's been able to drill down and give us a real detail, service by service, because it's not always the same in all services. It's not always a Monday. Some services it's a Tuesday. They do standby, so it changes over on the Monday. So it's that. So we're really doing that analysis at the patterns. We've been working with our colleagues in the trade unions as well to look at alternatives. We've done a number of benchmarking. We're not finding anything that any other council, etc., is doing that is different to what we're doing. We are at the point where the last resort may be in the policy review that we do have to, for short-term persistent, it would be reverting back to the disciplinary policy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda. Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at page 58, 84 resignations, is that unusually high? That does seem a lot. What are the kind of reasons for people kind of resigning? And the other question is, what's other? What is that? Does that cover any number of things? Thanks.
The main reason for folk resigning is resignations, and that's normally they're going to other posts. But remembering as well, we do have a number of temporary employees within the council, so they may well be securing permanent employment elsewhere. It also covers retirements. It recovers dismissals and grounds of capability through ill health retirements. Any reason, and the other reasons are where it gets to small numbers that then you could identify individuals. So we group them together as individuals because it could be dismissal through disciplinary, etc. So that's how we group it so that you can identify individuals.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Councillor Sangster. Any other questions? No one online? Okay, we can go to page 125. Oh no, it's a different report, sorry. Right, never mind that. Right, I think that's all for Amanda. We'll go to the next part of the East Ayrshire performance, which is digital. Paul Toland, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll take you through some of the highlights of the digital part of East Ayrshire Performs. If we look at the digital summary page, first of all, members are asked to note that we are making progress against the projects highlighted. There are 2 projects indicating 0% progress. However, I can advise that in terms of the planning project, that project board has now been established, and whilst it's early days in terms of the overall project life cycle, that piece of work is now underway. And similarly with the F&PM property asset management system, I can also confirm that that project plan has now been created and that system development sessions are now taking place on a weekly basis. Turning to the digital projects tab, the new care at home system went live in April of this year, and work has taken place since then to maximise the use of the data that's contained within the database, particularly to look at things like the more dynamic appointment scheduling. The tech team is also now fully in place and continue to research the range of digital products and aids that are available to help people remain in their homes longer. Not only those specialist products available in the marketplace, but also everyday domestic products that can similarly be used. We continue to roll out the M365 suite of products using our 70+ digital ambassadors to undertake technical assessments of the apps before we launch them across the council. At the same time, colleagues in ICT and information governance are working together to provide oversight around the use of advanced apps to ensure we have adequate governance and security controls in place to reduce the risk of data loss. And colleagues in People and Culture have recently appointed 2 digital trainers who are supporting the development of training pathways to upskill their employees and to give them the confidence and skill sets to get the most out of our digital solutions. Our council is now federated with over 85 participating organisations. That's a mix of other councils and NHS trusts, and over 500 of our users can now access OneDrive for internal file sharing and real-time document collaboration. Our M365 licence agreement will expire in May 2026, and we're currently undertaking a licence baseline review to ensure we maintain best value. The satellite network solution referred to is a pan-Ayrshire project we're working on in collaboration with the Ayrshire Civil Contingencies team. The project will provide a deployable Wi-Fi solution that can be used in any number of potential scenarios, including a significant fixed network outage or large-scale community events. Apologies. In terms of our customer contact, we continue to make changes to our telephony platform that will support the introduction of our centralised customer contact centre later in 2026. And as noted in the report, we have collated additional information and data to be presented to the council management team in due course to help determine the telephony services that will be migrated to the new contact centre and when that will happen. We're making good progress in terms of our digital front door offering, with final testing of the workflows that have been built into the Contact Us submissions form largely undertaken through November, and unless there are any showstoppers from that, then it's anticipated that the initial phase of our digital front door Contact Us process will commence later in December. And finally, turning to our ad hoc projects, our innovation team recently completed the last in a series of digital projects for environmental health, implementing a range of online services now available in that space. And working with colleagues in information governance and through consultation with our trade unions and council management team, we have now developed an AI policy covering safe and ethical use and best practice. Earlier on this week, we held a councillor conversation on AI and took the opportunity to showcase some in-house AI developments that ICT are working on. And we will shortly be asking council to formally approve the policy. Colleagues in ICT have been undertaking a number of in-house developments recently. The report has highlighted 3 such projects: the education tracking and monitoring system, which is now live, the incident management system, which we are hopeful we will complete early in the new year, and the new performance management system, which will go live around March next year. We have a very talented and skilled team of developers across ICT who are keen not only to support our third-party systems, but also to maximise their own skill sets for the benefit of the council. We're in the early stage of creating a development oversight group to strengthen collaboration across our ICT teams, to share knowledge and reduce the risk associated with ongoing support of complex systems, to promote best practice in software development, and to offer practical guidance, host technical demonstrations and workshops, and maintain a shared knowledge hub where our in-house developers can exchange ideas, tools and solutions. We need to be realistic that in terms that we cannot or don't have the capacity to build all systems in-house. So we're establishing a framework to manage projects presented to the Digital Oversight Board, ensuring that each project is assessed and evaluated to determine which will deliver the best value to the council. The oversight group will likely be led by the Digital Management Board that the council previously approved to oversee all digital programmes. Whatever we do in ICT, we will ensure that our ICT developments are compliant with all relevant ICT security standards, ever mindful of the cyber threat to the council. We will also continue to implement appropriate measures to safeguard our systems, our data and our users. So members, I hope that brief narrative there gives you some insight into the work we're undertaking to support the council's digital programme. I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Cogley was wanting in first.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I was very privileged to visit housing officers on Home Quarry Road to see the work that's being done at the moment in relation to damp and detecting damp in our houses. And I know from talking to constituents how helpful it has been. And to one of my constituents, it's, in her words, has changed her life. So it really has made a great impact, and very interesting to see the sort of data that is actually generated and the way it's used. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. But Paul, I'd also like to thank you for the AI workshop that you did with us. And the change in pace of artificial intelligence is quite scary. Some of us have used some of it in ChatGPT or Copilot. You can write an email and throw it in the Copilot and it makes you a better email. It's quite amazing how fast it works as well. I don't know if some of the senior managers want to, when you're thinking about hiring people, and if you can work out what's a genuine CV and what's been made by artificial intelligence to make a fantastic super duper CV, and how you spot that. I would imagine the importance of face-to-face interviews becomes even more relevant, because artificial intelligence can't replace you in that face-to-face interview. I don't know if any managers or IT, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the session we had the other day there that I was recently going through some application forms, and it was quite obvious by the language used in some of the application forms that they were absolutely created by probably ChatGPT or a similar line. It's something to be wary of, and I think once we get the policy approved, we do have a Learn Pro programme ready to launch for staff, to basically just give staff some indication and hints about what they should be looking for. Quite clearly, if you change the odd word here and there, then it's maybe hard to determine what was created by an AI platform and what is real. But I think the message we're getting across is we need to be very, very wary of anything that we're looking at these days, because we just don't know what the information source is. And one of the big things that we spoke about in terms of AI going forward is the absolute need to protect their data and their systems. Hence why we have got in our paper go to CMT next week around about some of the safeguards that we need to put around about use of data and reliance on data if we're not absolutely sure where the source of that data is coming from.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to come to Linda. I'm thinking about in education. Obviously, our young people need to learn this, because there's skills there, there's job opportunities there that's coming up with artificial intelligence. But at the same time, your teaching staff also have to monitor what's coming in front of them as far as sitting exams and preparing exams, and the assessors who will mark the papers are also got to be very, very careful looking for something that might be boosted or enhanced using AI, and what's allowed and what isn't. Linda?
I'm struggling to thank you for that question, because it's as deep as it's wide, Councillor Maven. So ultimately, that there are clear discussions ongoing within both education on a local and a national basis, because clearly in the examinations world, in terms of submission, where young people might be submitting a portfolio of evidence, for example, there needs to be that reassurance, and that's really at teacher level, and that's back down to the ongoing professionalism of teachers to be able to look at that. And it's a bit like your piece, Councillor Maben, around about there's an application and then there's the interview, so teachers will know their young people in front of them. And that's the real reason that teachers still need to be human in that space, albeit we are embracing the AI technology, but it is that bit about young people having a human person to relate to in that teaching and bringing forward. But there is that balance to be struck about the use of AI in education. So we've been working really closely with Paul and the team around about that part. But also as we look at things like UCAS applications for young people applying for university, they've got the same issue right now, around about that which is genuine and that which is AI. So for us in the education service, there's that ongoing reliance on the professionalism of our teachers. You would know straight away, if someone's, very, very quickly accelerated their ability. I'll take my own subject, it's mathematics. You know who's in front of you in that particular class, and if the next thing you know is there's a sudden input of that which is potentially, way above that ability level, that teachers have got clearly the wherewithal to be able to spot that. The other issue though, Councillor Maben, and this is the more worrying part, is the ongoing engagement of young people with chatbots. So really just one for the watching, and I can see my colleagues here from the Health and Social Care Partnership, is this part around about, young people almost developing relationships with AI in that space, and that's a really emergent issue for us right now in terms of the young people being able to decode that which is a real relationship in terms of that human relationship that we all know and understand, but actually the emergence of chatbots for young people is absolutely vast right now, and a lot of young people are they're a lot more engaged in it than I think we would like to think we know. So there's going to be that bit as well about protecting young people and educating young people around about clearly, deepfake, fake news, AI, and that which is, a human relationship, and that which is AI. So there's a few other dangers other than the bits around about submissions for examinations, etc. that I think we're probably going to be much more worried about in that space. But I'm certainly, very, very confident in my education workforce in that ongoing space to be able to decode the submissions from young people, but also, clearly Qualifications Scotland, as they now are, following on the rebrand from SQA, again, are facing this on quite a daily basis in terms of those submissions. So clearly a big thing for us all, but very, very grateful to Paul and the team for continuing to work with us in the Education Digital Board with Julie Watson and others to try and make sure we're equipped to deal with the challenge.
Thank you, Linda. We'll go Councillor Richardson online and then Councillor Sangster.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Maben. It's really a question for Linda. Linda, we've had some really good conversations, both at full council and at governance and scrutiny meetings, about education and how, continual assessment has become more and more of what happens in schools rather than the end of year final exam, etc. I'm just wondering, see, as AI progresses and this technology comes more and more to the fore, will the advance in technology maybe take us back in education to the point where final exams, where bags and all phones and laptops and what have you are all taken away and put at the bottom of the room, and nobody at the desk is sitting there with any internet access, and basically it's the knowledge that the pupils built up during their years of study that's in their own brain that goes onto a bit of paper over maybe a 3-hour period, that sort of will become again more and more important, because only then will we know that it's the pupils' knowledge that's actually gained the mark, and that they haven't been using AI technology to get an inflated mark. I'm just thinking that what my point is, Linda, as technology increases, will that maybe force education to go back to the final year exam becoming more and more important again? That's my question.
Through you, Chair. Indeed, Councillor Richardson, we haven't moved into that space around about continuous assessment. The only examinations, the only qualifications that are not really assessed in the exam hall for use of that word are really National 4 in the main. National 5 exams are still held higher, advanced higher. Clearly some of the work-based learning programmes are not examined anyway. So some of the NPA work, or if I was moving into technical and vocational type qualifications like SVQs, they've never attracted a terminal exam. So whilst, for example, National 4 English would be by submission, that the teacher again is in the room with those young people in terms of that continuous assessment. So there is still that safeguard for anything that's not terminally assessed and by the way of a final exam. But if you took the likes of higher English, where there's again a portfolio, again it's that piece around about there is a final exam which carries significant weight. So the system hasn't moved on. Clearly you'll be aware there was the Hayward review of late, which sought to simply reduce the number of exams. Clearly that young people were taking in terms of that high stakes exam system, but that's not as yet been taken forward. But we are amidst a curriculum refresh right now in Scotland, Councillor Richardson, that's ongoing. So we'll see what comes out of that in that space. That'll be emergent around about the 2029-2030 timescale. So that's been worked up at the moment, but we haven't moved away from the terminal exams at this stage.
Thanks, Linda. That's from my point of view, that's good to hear.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question. Councillor Sangster.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering around the Smart Hub in Galston. On page 64, you're saying there's over 400 kind of supported people, families have now visited. Of those figures, how many are actually using the equipment? Do you know? That might not be a question you can answer just now. I'm just curious about that. I found myself in the position of having to visit the Smart Hub on a personal level for my dad to get door sensors. And can I just assure you that they work? Because I went to visit him out with the time, forgot to switch the button, and within about 2 minutes I got a phone call to say, your dad's door's opened. Oh, I'm here. So it does work. That's the good news. But I'm just wondering just how many within East Ayrshire are actually using the kind of technology, and if it's how that's going.
Yeah. Happy to come in on that. There's over 4,500 people that use tech across East Ayrshire. 77 of the people who've visited the Galston Hub have been members of the public with their family members looking to use it. And there's some great stories that have come through using that kind of consumer-led technology alongside the stuff that we directly provide. One that comes to mind is the use of Comp, which is like a large screen television that you can use interactively with relatives. The individual has shared their story and their partner had to go into hospital and we are looking for an emergency residential placement for the individual because they couldn't be left alone. But the family were able to stay in touch with their relative and maintain them at home for the period of 12 weeks that the relative was in hospital. And that's probably a saving of probably about £9,000. So they are using the consumer technology. Comp's very natural because it is like a TV and you can have calls directly with your relatives using Comp. So it's been really successful, but more broadly, there's 4,500 people who use tech.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster. And for the reply. Cheers. We'll go back to, if there's no more questions. Nothing online. Well, can I wind that one up? It's East Ayrshire Performs Summary Report. If we go back to page 12, elected members, you'll see the recommendations. Paragraph 2, there's a load of recommendations for members of the Cabinet, which I'm not going to read out. At the bottom of the page, it's recommending members note the contents of this report. We're happy with that, elected members, note the contents of the report. Thank you. And thank you to all the officers that were here presenting on East Ayrshire Performs. We want the next item on the agenda, which is the annual Treasury Management Report 24-25 and the mid-year updates. It's page 66 to 89 on your papers, members, and we go to Robin Baker, the Exchequer and Capital Finance Manager. That's a fine job title.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The reporting requirements for Treasury Management are defined within SITFR's Treasury Code of Practice, and this report is the annual report for the financial year 24-25 and a mid-year update for the current financial year 25-26. Two main purposes of the report are firstly in providing a summary of Treasury Management for the previous financial year. Along with an update of current year activity, it provides an opportunity for scrutiny of the Council's Treasury Management activity, its strategy, its policies and practices. Secondly, by setting out the detail of the Council's borrowing activity and the capital expenditure that determines this, together with information in respect of how surplus cash balances are invested, it should provide members with assurance that this is being transacted in line with the Council's Treasury strategy and that the prudential and Treasury indicators set in each year have not been exceeded. Importantly, the report confirms activity has been undertaken in accordance with the Code of Practice, in particular that the overall capital programmes were agreed and have been delivered within the key parameters of affordability, sustainability and prudence. Part 1 covers past Treasury activity for 24-25, while Part 2 summarises the present and yet to come position for 25-26. The key point to highlight for both years is the reduction in the actual and planned level of borrowing as capital projects move through the design and planning stages into contract delivery and timelines are finalised for these. Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 2 are to note the activity for 24-25 and 25-26 and to remit the report to Council for approval next week. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you very much. We'll open it up for questions or comments, elected members. No one at all. Anyone online? Councillor Richardson.
Thanks very much for the summary of that report, Robin. Just a quick question from me. You mentioned at the end there that the total borrowing requirement of East Ayrshire Council as capital projects move through is actually going to fall during the period. Does that mean that there's headroom for further borrowing? Now I'm thinking about one topic which is very high in the public's agenda and also front and centre at council nowadays, which is the regeneration of Kilmarnock Town Centre. Does this mean that as our total borrowing is falling, that in the future there may be more headroom for borrowing with regards potential improvements to the town centre?
Through you, Chair, I'll maybe just clarify. Whilst the in-year borrowing figure has reduced due to the phasing of the capital projects, the intention is that those projects will still be delivered, but in future years. So the borrowing required will be the same. So there's no actual reduction over the longer period of time. In terms of headroom, I think Cabinet agreed yesterday to a full review of the capital investment programme. So as part of the Treasury strategy for 26-27, in line with the capital programme, any capacity within the programme would certainly be made available at that time for consideration. So unfortunately, no, there's no additional headroom at this stage.
Thanks for the answer. Not exactly what I was wanting to hear, but thanks for the answer.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I think that the table 4 on page 71 is kind of looking at what you were thinking as the amount of borrowing long term slowly goes down. I absolutely get where you were coming from with that. No other questions, comments? No, you're getting off light, Robin, this time. We'll go to the recommendations, which is on page 66. Members. And it's notes annual treasury review for the financial year.
Yeah, happy to agree.
Ends in March. Thank you. Note the update in treasury activity and remit the annual treasury management review to the next council meeting, which is on the 11th. Note the contents of the report. Members, are we all happy with that? Note the contents, the recommendations. Thank you. Move on to the next item on the agenda, please, which is item 5, risk management strategy for 25-26 biannual report. It's pages 90 to 124 on your papers, members. And we go to Ian Tuff, Head of Corporate Support.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. Just a very short introduction from myself. I'm joined by the Council's risk management lead, Emma Livingston, as well, if there's any questions at the end of this. But really, you will have been familiar with the risk management strategy and the corporate risk register being reported through East Ayrshire Performs in the past. With the new arrangements now, we are reporting this to you separately, and we'll do that twice a year, Chair. So this is the first time under those new arrangements we've presented this. Just by way of highlights to pick out for elected members, at paragraph 6, we describe the really good progress that's been made against actions that are within the improvement plan, that are within the risk management strategy. And also at paragraph 10, Chair, really just to pick out some of the emerging issues that have been picked up in our discussions through the Strategic Risk Officers Group, chaired by the Chief Executive over the last period, and that things that have emerged that have now been added to the risk register most recently. Many of them you'll be familiar with. In fact, we've just had a really positive conversation round about one of them around artificial intelligence. So you'll see them listed at paragraph 10. The other challenges around about workforce, a significant area for is around demographic and population change, and the reliance on single software as well. Again, members will be familiar with all of them. With those short introductory comments, Chair, happy to take any questions, and myself, Emma, our colleagues in the room as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Elected members, I don't know if there's anyone online. Any questions or any comments? Risk management strategy. No one? Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, just on page 96, Learn Pro modules, do we have a general within the council, is there a good uptake of the training with the Learn Pro modules? Do we have a really good uptake, or are we chasing people?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So currently, as at the 3rd of December, 526 employees council-wide had completed the e-learning module, but this has actually now been moved to management essentials. So hopefully we'll see a better uptake in the future. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster and Emma, for the reply. No other questions? You're getting off late as well. Very good. We'll go back to the recommendations, please. Elected members, if there's no other questions or comments. It's page 90, paragraph 2. Note the progress of actions within the Strategic Risk Management Improvement Plan. That's Appendix 1. Approve the contents of the Corporate Risk Register. Appendix 2, and otherwise note the contents of the report. Elected members, happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to the next part in the agenda is item 6, response to the Accounts Commission review of exit packages report. And that's going to Amanda Lowe. It's page 125.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is detailed in paragraph 1 with the backgrounds in 3 through to 5. As members will be aware, a letter was issued by the Accounts Commission on the 8th of September to leaders of the Council and Chief Executives following a review of the decision-making of exit packages for senior officers within Glasgow City Council. Attached was a report prepared by the Controller of the Audit, which was in relation to the scrutiny, governance, transparency and decision-making of exit packages of the senior officers in Glasgow City Council. The letter is Appendix 1 in the report, and the report is in Appendix 2. Within East Ayrshire Council, we have robust systems in place, and following Cabinet on the 20th of August, I can confirm that we're undertaking a review of all our temporary arrangements, secondments and early departure policies, and they will be reported back to Cabinet in due course. The main body of the report within paragraphs 6 through to 22 outlines all the points raised within the Accounts Commission report, which is, as I said, in Appendix 2, and confirms that East Ayrshire Council has robust systems in place, that decisions for our members and officers uphold the 9 key principles of Public Life Scotland, and therefore gives assurance that these are all adhered to. It should be noted that given the policies and procedures that we've got in place, there's no possibility that these events that took place within Glasgow City Council would be replicated within East Ayrshire Council. For information, we're also, and you'll see in the report, going to arrange for the new year a councillor conversation where we'll provide further clarity on all the policies and how they interlink with one another. The recommendations are laid out in paragraph 2, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Elected members, have any questions or comments? I want to come back to Amanda on this report. No one online? Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mabin. Amanda, just a question directly for yourself. Obviously, there's a lot in this paper about what Glasgow City Council did and what they may have done wrong or got right, etc. Just to get straight to the nub of the matter, say one of the senior managers at East Ayrshire Council wanted to retire early, and in the past we've heard in this chamber about, maybe packages have been sweetened somewhat so that they could go early on a, let's just say, a slightly better pension arrangement or whatever. Within East Ayrshire Council, who actually has to sign that off, Amanda? Is that a decision as to whether that package can be made available? Is that made purely by officers, or would it have to go to full cabinet, or would it have to go to full council? How do we actually treat those cases currently within East Ayrshire?
Through you, Chair, all those cases go to Cabinet. I take reports to Cabinet. So through the scheme of delegation, should we have, for example, a temporary employee that has gained service that's entitled to a redundancy payment through a scheme of delegation, I can approve that. It also goes to the Workforce Strategy Group. The details are in the report. And then I report it back to Cabinet for noting. But any package that you're attaining to is agreed by Cabinet. So there's a business case put forward first by the service, it goes to the Workforce Scrutiny Group, and then it would go to Cabinet for approval.
Thanks, Amanda. Again, that's the answer that I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that elected members have final control over any packages that are offered. That's great. That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. And just back to Amanda, is what's happened in Glasgow? Is this report with the Glasgow, that's best practice that we should be following, or that's what went wrong there and we shouldn't follow?
Just to confirm, I'm conscious we're in public session, but so are the reports. The current Chief Executive Glasgow, when they realised the situation they'd inherited, commissioned both a KC investigation or an internal investigation, and that report's been published. So we can provide the link for any member that wants to read. But again, don't know how to spell Schadenfreude, but you don't always want to glory in others' failures. But it has no impact in the council's arrangement because, as Amanda has said, this council's arrangements have always been that the head of service only has discretion where it's legal entitlement to redundancy. So if it's a clear redundancy situation, the law says if somebody's done X years of service, they're entitled to Y payment, and therefore there's no discretion to be exercised. Where there's any potential discretion to be exercised in accordance with the council's approved policies and procedures, then it still comes to Cabinet. So any question of anyone getting what we call added years, and it's not a sweetener, it's about what makes business sense, and that's why it comes to Cabinet for members to decide. That's always been our way. The problem at Glasgow, as you will see in their public report, and they haven't hidden it, was that almost unbelievably in 2020, whatever it was about 2020, their arrangements were that no packages went to the Cabinet, to the members, including the Chief Execs, which is why she's now paying her package back. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments, questions on this report? No one online? Okay, elected members, I'll take you back to the recommendations, please. Just page 125. Paragraph 2. So we agree the council has a robust arrangements in place. That's good to hear for the approval of restructuring exit packages, and we agree the decisions of elected members and officers should uphold the 9 key principles of public life in Scotland. So, and we should all have these memorised, of course: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, leadership, public services, respect. Otherwise, we know the contents of the reports, elected members.
Agreed.
And I'll quiz you later on these 9 key principles. I hope you remember them. Thank you. And we'll go to the next part of the agenda, which is item 7, corporate fraud team, mid-year progress report, protecting the public purse, working together to stamp out fraud. We go to Paul Davis, who's the audit manager. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to introduce Paul Brown, sitting at the back of the room, who started last week as North Ayrshire Council's new Senior Manager for Audit, Fraud, Safety, Risk and Insurance. He's joining us today to observe, and sitting next to him, also happy to introduce Mohammed Pandika Shalakandi, our new Senior Auditor, who joined us 2 weeks ago. So, the purpose of this established report is to provide committee with the Corporate Fraud Team Mid-Year Progress Report for 25-26, to advise of the cumulative outcomes from the Corporate Fraud Team since inception in January 2017, and also to provide an update on the current National Fraud Initiative exercise. take the report as read and briefly highlight a few of the key paragraphs. As noted at paragraph 5, the CIRFA Code of Practice on Managing the Risk of Fraud and Corruption compliance statement continues to be a standing item in the mid-year and annual reports. This can be found at Appendix 1 and reflects the Council's approval of the new Counter Fraud and Corruption strategy on the 28th of August this year. Moving to paragraph 13 and the achievements to date, a report reflecting the work of the corporate fraud team during the first 6 months of the year, prepared by North Ayrshire Council, is attached to Appendix 2, which includes reference to the annual International Fraud Awareness Week, which took place from the 16th to the 22nd of November and was promoted through social media. Cumulative outcomes since January 17 are summarised by the Chief Auditor in Appendix 3. I'd just like to highlight some of the key points from Appendices 2 and 3. For the 6-month period covered by this report, there have been 197 new referrals to the team from East Ayrshire staff and residents. This continues to demonstrate a high volume of referrals and marks a high point since the inception of the Joint Fraud Service. A total of 201 cases were closed during the 6-month period, and the financial outcomes for East Ayrshire Council can be summarised as shown in the table on page 162, and these total £10,831. Of course, in addition to the financial outcomes, there are other outcomes and benefits which are noted, including 23 housing tenancy recoveries made in conjunction with housing services. 36 proactive housing succession checks have been concluded. 14 referrals have been made to the Single Fraud Investigation Service. 3 referrals have been made to other local authorities or partner agencies. 4 blue badges have been recovered and a further 7 warning letters issued, and 21 instances of a verbal warning being given to the badge holder or to the third-party user. Regarding the National Fraud Initiative, the 24-25 national exercise is now underway, and data sets for the exercise were submitted to the Cabinet Office in the autumn of 2024. Matches have been released at various points since then and throughout early 25. The matches received thus far have been passed out to services within the Council for investigation, and they have until the 31st of March 26 to complete the review of these matches. Paragraph 14 just highlights the supporting assurance to chief officers, and as noted in the previous reports to committee, the Director of Finance and Digital and the Head of Housing and Communities recognise the work of the corporate fraud team in providing assurance and compliance measures and in supporting service performance across a range of indicators. And finally, as noted at paragraph 20, Committee considered External Audit's 24-25 annual report on the 25th of September, with Audit Scotland concluding at paragraphs 87 and 88 that standards of conduct and arrangements for the prevention and detection of fraud and error were appropriate. The recommendations are noted at paragraph 2, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Elected members. We'll go with Councillor Richardson online, and then we'll go to Councillor Sangster.
Thanks again, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mabin. Paul, just a quick question for you. One of the most positive things I'm seeing in the report is on page 162, and the fact that 23 housing tenancy recoveries have been made in conjunction with East Ayrshire Council Housing Services. Obviously, we are in the middle of a housing crisis, so to free up those 23 properties to be relet, I mean, that's absolutely fantastic work. Obviously, there's information in there about blue badges and such, but that was the figure that jumped off the paper for me. The fact that 23 tenants are now in properties that have been freed up by recovering the previous tenancy. But my question was, how do you guys in the fraud team find out about these properties? Is it the fact that next door neighbours contact the council and say, look, the tenant's not been at the property for 6 months or something, you may well want to look into this? How do we get the tip off, or how do we get the referral? Sorry, the right word would be referral. How do we get the referrals in these coming in?
Through you, Chair. The referrals that come into the corporate fraud team can be, generally they're coming from council services, and in this case housing, but they can also be referrals from members of the public. Most of the housing tenancy, the succession ones there, as well as the recoveries, the referrals are coming from housing services based on intelligence they have. And the corporate fraud team have access to all the relevant council systems as well as national databases, and they can do open source checks through social media and other means to build that picture of where the tenants are and how the houses are occupied or not. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Cheers.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Councillor Richardson. I think basically people will tell on them, people will grass them up, whether it's members of the public, family, friends. If someone's taking the mickey out of the system, someone will tell on them. I've had a couple from members of the public that I've reported to corporate fraud team. I don't get a follow-up information because I just basically let them go on with that work and do their job. What I've heard as well from neighbourhood coaches and conversations with them, they can visit houses and see if the bins have been emptied. They can check on the meters to see if there's electricity and gas running. They can see if the post is being delivered. They've got all different ways and techniques, even driving past in the evening to see if there's lights on. If they're driving past time after time after time and there's no lights in that house, they can then investigate if the tenancy is actually empty or not. So there's loads of different ways they can investigate. If I can go back to Paul on the same page, actually, Paul, is 162. 14 referrals made to single fraud investigation service. So that's not a council service. We're passing that to someone else. Is that us going possibly legal and something that might go, they would refer to Procurator Fiscal, perhaps? Can you clarify?
Yep, the Single Fraud Investigation Service is a partnership between the DWP Fraud Investigation Service, HMRC, and local authorities. So it's sharing that information all those agencies hold to help investigate fraud and to pass information on relevant to benefits to the DWP to investigate, for example.
Right, thank you. And they would try and recover those benefits if they see something's wrong. Thank you very much. Any other? Oh, sorry, Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 156, paragraph 15. I suppose my question is similar to what Councillor Richardson was asking in terms of fighting blue badge misuse. I'm assuming that a lot of that does come from people probably reporting to yourselves that maybe somebody's relatives passed away and they're using their blue badge, which I've heard happens. And how much powers do the kind of parking enforcement officers have? Do they have the right to go up to somebody and say, I want to see your blue badge and I want to see the picture? Are they allowed to do that? Or is it purely based on somebody's reported it or there's a suspicion that somebody's misusing it?
Again, a lot of it will come from referrals from the public if they suspect someone they know is misusing a badge. Parking enforcement officers within ARA do work closely with the corporate fraud team to share information. And the parking enforcement officers do, I know from previous referrals, check the blue badges on vehicles, and in some cases they'll wait to see that the person returning to the vehicle matches the blue badge, those sort of things.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster and Paul, for the reply. Any other questions, comments? No one online. Okay, members, if we go back to page 154, And we wish you well, Paul, and your team. You're doing great work with the corporate fraud team. So more power to your elbow. Paragraph 2 is the recommendations. Notes the council's arrangements to manage the risk of fraud and corruption, comply with SIPFA code of practice, note the positive mid-year cumulative update report, note International Fraud Awareness Week, which has just passed last November, was promoted in social media. East North Ayrshire councils, notes the National Fraud Initiative update, positive observation, external audit regarding fraud arrangements, and otherwise notes the content of the report. Elected members. Happy with that. Thank you. Thumbs up. Thank you, Councillor Lennox. We'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Item 8 is the internal audit plan, mid-year progress report. We're back to Paul Davis. Thank you again, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This is another established report, and the purpose of this is to provide members with a mid-year progress report on activity, demonstrating good progress against the 25-26 internal audit plan, which will inform the statutory internal audit annual opinion. Also to present a revised plan for approval by committee in line with good practice. And finally, to demonstrate continued compliance with current statutory and regulatory obligations. Again, I'll keep this brief and would just like to highlight a few key paragraphs. Perhaps the key paragraph is paragraph 13. The plan does not require to be completed to inform the annual opinion, but sufficient work as determined by the Chief Auditor does require to be carried out, and we are currently projecting that sufficient work will be carried out this year. Paragraph 16 concerns plan progress and resourcing, and this goes to paragraph 21. The original plan anticipated 785 days being available, including 45 days outsourced. Those 740 in-house days were based on 3.86 FTE auditors who remain in place, with a small increase in projected days to 760. And a reduction in projected outsourced days to 15, resulting in a revised plan projecting 775 days. At mid-year, we've delivered 379 days, which is 49% of the planned days as laid out in Table 1. A significant contribution was also made in year by our graduate intern. And after extensive recruitment, a senior auditor post vacant since 31st of March was filled 2 weeks ago, and Mohammed joins us here today. Appendices 3A and 3B demonstrate good progress with most jobs at either green or amber status. Where jobs are shown as completed, that assignment report is either available on the councillor's notice board or about to be posted. Appendix 4 shows the current position for follow-up exercises. The 4 completed exercises show outcomes which continue the established pattern of 100% implementation, which means that recommendations have been found to be either fully or sufficiently implemented during our testing of evidence, which reflects a high level of engagement by the services. Moving to the revisions to the plan, as noted at paragraph 24, our detailed revised plan is set out in appendices 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B and 4, with changes summarised in this paragraph in Table 2. Appendix 2B, the Data Analytics Rolling Assurance Programme, we've added 3 new council tax since the 5th of June to complement the work of the corporate fraud team. Changes to planned assignments are laid out item by item in appendices 3A and 3B, with additions and deferrals summarised in Table 2. In line with established practice, all blue deferrals will be considered during the 26-27 planning process for potential inclusion, with those outcomes reported to committee at that time. And changes to follow-up scheduling is shown in Appendix 4. In line with established practice, blue follow-ups are automatically rescheduled into next year's plan, as opposed to being deferred for consideration and potential inclusion in next year's plan. Recommendations are set out at paragraph 2. That's all I was planning to say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul, for presenting that report. Elected members, have any questions or comments on the internal audit plan and your progress? No one online? Yeah, you're going to get off light with this one, Paul, looks like. No questions, no comments. In that case, I'll take you back to page 166 for the recommendations. My laptop will work. As usual, we're at paragraph 2 for our recommendations. Note the Chief Auditor is currently projecting sufficient work will be carried out to inform an annual opinion. Approve the revised live internal audit plan and otherwise note the contents of the report. Elected members. Happy with that? Thank you. That concludes item 8 in the agenda. We'll go to item 9 is the climate change public sector report. That's quite a chunky report. I propose what we do, elected members, is take a quick comfort break, just 10 minutes. If anyone needs a loo, because I think this last one might take a wee while. Okay, elected members. Yeah.
I mean, your hands, Chair. My introduction will be quite short, but it's whether or not you have comments on the detail. That's entirely up to members, but my introduction will be a couple of minutes.
Aye, right. Thank you, elected members. We'll do 10 minutes, quick comfort break, and we'll come back. And it's at the last item on the agenda. We'll see you in 10. Thank you. You can restart the record. We're recording again. Very good. Thank you, elected members, and welcome back. That's the last item on the agenda is climate change public sector report. Page 189 to 268 on your papers. We're going to Ian Tough, Head of Corporate Support. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. So as you mentioned, Chair, does cover a lot of ground, this report, so my introduction will be short and leave some time for questions if there are any. So this is the first report to Governance and Scrutiny Committee under our revised arrangements where responsibility for climate change activity has been fully mainstreamed across services with additional support provided by the Council's Programme Management Office. The substantive part of this report is to present our climate change duties return for 24-25, which was approved by Cabinet at its meeting on 19 November 2025 and has since been submitted to the Scottish Government to meet the statutory deadline of 30 November 2025. The report provides a summary, members, of the Council's performance in reducing our carbon emissions in the last year. This is set out from paragraph 9, and you will note that in the longer term between 2012 and 13 and 24-25, there was a reduction of 64.4% in our emissions. In the medium term between 2021 and 22 and 24-25, there was a reduction of 53%. However, in the last year, there was a small increase in our emissions of 3.5%. This small annual increase is described at paragraph 12 and can be explained by the decision last year of Council to revert our waste fleet from HVO fuel back to diesel. The positive longer-term trend is also shown at figure 2 at paragraph 31 and provides a visual representation of the positive progress the Council has made. The report also includes information on the Scottish Government's emissions scopes, and this is described at paragraph 37, and notes where some changes are anticipated that will have an impact on our future performance and reporting arrangements. Details of the wide range of activity undertaken by services is described throughout the report under the 4 strategic themes of energy, waste, transport, and natural environment. There is too much to do all justice in my introduction, Chair, but I did want to take this opportunity to highlight 2 areas. Firstly, as described at paragraph 158, the continued exceptional work in our schools and the recent annual Youth Climate Change Conference, where our young people celebrate and showcase the incredible work that they do, was on show. And secondly, Chair, the Net Zero Accelerator project that's described at paragraph 169, and that's led by David McDowell's team, has supported 143 businesses and won the Building Towards a Just Transition Award at last month's National COSLA Awards, which was a fantastic achievement, Chair. With those introductory comments, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 2, and my colleague Thomas Reid from our Programme Management Officers, who's been at the heart of preparing this report, will happily answer any questions. I'm not sure how many services are left here, Chair, but clearly there are a number of the measures within this report that services provide. So if we can't answer the question, we'll get information for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, I'll go first if I can look at page 195. And it's figure 2 is that's the table, and it's just a general question. I mean, we're showing the graph steadily going down away where carbon emissions is reducing over 10 years. It's great work over the last 10 years and only a very small increase this year. The question is, how do we keep going? How do we keep reducing? What's the areas we're going to try and target? Because this is getting tougher and tougher now to reduce these emissions.
Thanks, Chair. That is a challenge for us, and I mentioned in my introduction that the types of measures that we are being asked to record is going to change over the next year. The Scottish Government has already given that indication. So we expect, and to be perfectly honest with the elected members today, we will be coming back next year to show an increase in those areas. Particularly, we know, and Thomas can talk about this a wee bit, but we know that areas such as procurement and travel to work for employees, etc., will be added to our measures. We haven't been collecting that to that extent. So the emissions for those two items particularly will mean our reports and our statutory return will show an increase. So Thomas, do you want to add to any of that?
Yeah, just to add to what Ian's saying there, next year we're looking at introducing more Scope 3 emissions, which become then mandatory by Scottish Government. At the moment we report on waste, which is one of our big ones. We've reduced over the last 3 or 4 years. We also report on home working just now, but we are looking to add to that home commuting, so staff's home to work mileage and those emissions attached to that. We're also looking, as you noted, further down the line, procurement emissions. At this point in time, only 3 councils in Scotland report on procurement, and at this point it's an estimate they produce based on total procurement spend. East Wren is one of those councils, and they reported last year 40,000 tonnes of CO2 over and above their 13 tonnes of their general emissions, so huge increase. Commentators online are suggesting also that going between now and 2030, that Scope 1 and 2 emissions will be 30% of all emissions. So it's the tip of the iceberg going forward. With East Ayrshire, if we were to look at procurement as one of those, we might increase by 46,000 tonnes of CO2 over the next 2 or 3 years when we start to record that. So it is looking like we are going to increase towards net zero at 2030, not decrease. But these will be, at this point, legacy emissions, so we still work towards reducing those, and those key areas will be in more energy going forward. So reducing more electric and gas consumption will be key where we can, and that aligns to some of the work already we've done around LED replacement and more street lighting, which we saw this year again reducing by another 17.5%, on 6% from last year. So there is obviously bits we can keep to look to reduce. But as I saw this year, an increase of 3.5% was due to our change back to diesel from HVO, which added on there about 2,500 tonnes of CO2. So going forward, we'll have to try and balance the reduction in emissions with the cost of reducing those emissions.
Thank you very much. East Wren, 40,000 for procurement. I mean, we've been working hard over 10 years to reduce from 45,000 and work our way down, and now we're going to get kicked all the way back up again.
And it looks that way going forward. And I think another few comments as well is further down the line, these more complicated emissions such as capital costs. So we're looking at the emissions associated with the making of materials. So if we're building schools or other buildings, community centres, such likes, it'll be the emissions associated with the actual manufacturing of concrete, steel beams. All that will come into our emissions total for that period, for that year. Also looking at the cost of our fleet, not just about running our fleet in terms of electric, but the emissions to make that electric vehicle as well. So as we purchase, we'll have to account for that on that year. So there's a lot coming on board, it would seem. The Scottish Government said that they'll start to record mandatory Scope 3 emissions by November 27. We have about 15 categories at this point to look at over the next 2 or 3 years. Scottish Government have those grouped into 3 groups. Group 1 will be the first group we'll look to make mandatory, and that includes that home to work commuting. We already report on waste, but those kind of easy to access, easy to report on will be the first ones, then later procurement and other ones around the capital goods. So they are only going to increase, unfortunately.
And I take it as the Scottish Government try to standardise it for each local authority, because some local authorities are recording this and some aren't just now.
So at this point in time, most local authorities report the ones that we report on. For example, last year, North Ayrshire only reported on, I think, waste, but not home working. They are doing that this year. So we do see councils slowly but surely making our way towards voluntary, I suppose, reporting on those Scope 3 emissions. There are 32 councils, they are very different in what they report, but certainly going forward, there is a key push from Scottish Government that we do this this voluntary rather than mandatory, but by November 27, there will be ones that will be mandatory, so that will align councils more like each other in terms of the reporting.
Right, thank you. That'll be interesting. We can then get comparisons with other councils more accurate. I've 4 people online. I'll go Councillor McGregor and then Councillor Lennox, and then I'll come back in the room.
Thanks very much, Chair, and again, thanks for the report. It was just a general question. I don't know how relevant this is or anything that, that officers can advise, but obviously getting people onto public transport and out of cars is a huge part of net zero. We find in the Irvine Valley another SBT-funded bus service being removed imminently, which is going to have quite an effect on a number of people who see it as a lifeline bus service. Is there any advice you can give round about that? Obviously, I'm liaising with SBT to try and have these things looked at in the wider context of net zero as well as passenger demand. Sorry, that's a bit all over the place, but I just thought this might be an opportunity to look at that side of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Actually, it's a topical area for us. You'll recall last year, I think it was, that the Council agreed to put some money aside to look at opportunities for community transport to encourage some of that shift as well and to support communities, particularly in the rural area. I know the Deputy Chief Executive has started work on that recently, has brought together an officer group to look at it, and I think this was touched on at Cabinet as well when this report was considered there. So it is very much a topical issue for us. It combines not just our commitment around encouraging people out of cars and onto other transport modes, but also to look at the connectivity in communities, particularly in our rural areas. So it's not all driven by emissions and trying to reduce emissions, it's about connectivity as much as that. So an interesting area and one that I certainly will come back to elected members again in the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Interesting question, because obviously we want people out of cars and using public transport, but it's tricky if the public transport gets withdrawn. Go to Councillor Lennox next, please.
Thanks again, Chair. A good report, Ian. Thanks very much. Very comprehensive. It's great to see that we're taking strides forward in quite a number of areas there in terms of getting to net zero. As elected members, we've all done the carbon literacy training. Well, most of us have. Maybe some of the more recent elected councillors maybe not done that. So I was just going to suggest probably it would be worthwhile just to give us all a wee refresher session in terms of carbon literacy. There's one bugbear that I have, which I think needs to be addressed a bit more stringently by all of us as elected members, and that's the number of hard copy reports that we see in chambers on a regular basis. I'm the wrong side of 60 and I totally use digital copies. I don't use hard copies. And I hear folk complaining, oh, I need a hard copy to write my notes in, etc., etc. Well, the way I look at it is if somebody of my age can do it, then there's plenty of youngerines in there that don't need hard copies. So what I was just going to suggest was that in terms of our commitment, if we're really serious about getting to net zero, then we all need to be trying a wee bit harder just to stop producing all this paper that's eventually going to probably, hopefully get recycled. But I think we need to have another wee training session just to educate folk on how to use a digital copy online to get from page to page. We need to try and up the game a wee bit, because I think we've all got a responsibility to stop producing that amount of paper that the council produces on an annual basis. It must be a forest in some respects. So I would just like to, and I guess I'm sounding like a broken record. I've brought this up before, but nothing's ever been done about it, and I see the situation getting worse actually. So I think as a council we need to be doing something to set the record straight here and get rid of these hard copies and get to digital copies. Thanks, Chair. I'll go off my soapbox now.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox. And I tease my wife about this because I'm digital and she gets paper copies. And we have wee arguments about this. Councillor Cogley's sitting here with a great big wad of papers. So she wants to come back in.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lennox, and you're absolutely right in what you were saying. And as you were speaking, I was trying to shuffle my papers under the table so that nobody could see them. Anyway, I didn't manage to do that. Interestingly, in the previous council term, we did have a session whereby, well, we actually had a programme and a working group where we were trying to go paper-free and paper. We ended up doing paper light, and it was some kind of hybrid. And I think it didn't really work because for those of us who are a little bit lazy, it was very easy to then just restart using the paper stuff. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we should reintroduce that and perhaps just go cold turkey and go completely paper-free. Now, North Ayrshire Council, I know, certainly from 2017 onwards, were paper-free. And I don't know whether that remains the case, but if they are, then we should certainly be up with North Ayrshire Council on that one. But your comments are absolutely valid, and it was a very good soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley.
David, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Ian and then David.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to cover Councillor Lennox's first point as well around the training, and I think it was well received when it was done. I participated in it myself. It was maybe 18 months ago, 2 years, I think, possibly. So it's certainly something we'd be encouraging again. We will, I think, as we look at all of the council strategic framework documents over the next period, in the run-up to the council elections in 2027 and having them all refreshed, that we would perhaps look as part of that to the climate change strategy, where we would want to align anything that we've done in there with any learning and training opportunities for elected members. On the other point, then absolutely, we would always encourage any initiatives that would reduce our emissions, whether it's cabinet papers and digitalising, all of that, then absolutely. But clearly it's down to individual behaviours and preferences around some of that. Maybe David's want to come in on that part.
No, I was just wondering if that's the consensus view of the committee, does the committee wish that translated into an action? As Councillor Cogley reminds, there was this whole review before. I think Democratic were involved, and the output was a report to the council recommending paperless. As has been described, paperless became paper light. If the definition of a camel is a horse designed by a committee, that's what we ended up with paper light. because everyone was concerned that those colleagues, never mentioned or name colleagues, but those who might need the papers should always get the papers. And to be fair, leaving the joking aside, there are certain members and can be members without pointing at, who have certain requirements. So it was immediately recognised that some folk may well need to access certain forms of print, etc., etc. But in the main, that became a broad exemption that if any member actually insisted on paper copies, they would be provided. The last time this came up, I checked, and we had 23 members on special arrangements and 9 members adhering to paperless and taking it electronically. So you're very much in a minority, Councillor Lennox. If there is an appetite, then it would be a function of this committee to make that recommendation, and then we would bring a report to Council, because it would take Council to change the arrangements, because it was Council that put these arrangements in place. So I'm not pushing it. I don't know if now, and between now and 27 is the time, or if it's for the new Council, but I'm just looking whether, because if we have these discussions and no actions come out of them, then they just hang in the wind. So it's a genuine ask of this committee whether or not, if that's the majority view, you want that to translate into an action, because if we don't bring it back and put it in front of Council, nothing will change.
Thank you, David. And is that something we should vote on? Obviously, Councillor Lennox would be happy to propose that. I would be happy to second that we put a recommendation to Council that we should all be going digital, paperless, if possible.
I think, to be clear, what I'd be simply saying is that you remit to officers, probably myself and Ian in this situation, but certainly remit to officers to bring a report to Council, setting out the options. I wouldn't necessarily make the recommendation to Council what they do, but if you remit it to bring the paper, then it will come to Council, and Council will then need to decide whether it does want to strengthen these arrangements, the current approach, and go full paperless, with still the limited exceptions where there is an absolute need in legislative terms, but not the general exception at the moment where anybody that wants them, need or not, gets them. So we can bring the paper back in an updated form and to Council. But I wouldn't do that if we're going to get the same decision as before. So I'm just looking for a steer whether the members here feel that would be worthwhile on the back of Councillor Lennox representations, because as the point has been made, we keep talking about it, or members, the Council, but if we don't actually bring it back in front of Council, there's no opportunity to change the arrangements.
Elected members are happy to bring that recommendation back to Council, that Ian Tuff and David Mitchell make us a paper to go digital, paper light. On that subject only, elected members, Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're expecting our constituents to recycle. I think we need to lead by example, don't we?
I'm of a thumbs up from Councillor Hogg. Any elected members online on this specific issue raised by Councillor Lennox? Thumbs up from Councillor McGregor as well. And Councillor Todd. I think we're all in agreement.
Well, add an extra part to the minute then, just noting the remit for officers to bring back an updated report on the previous paperless proposals, or fresh paperless, revised paperless proposals, updated, whatever, and we'll bring it to Council. I don't see it coming before the budget, but we could maybe try and get it into March. So if there's going to be any change, it can be done in the next financial year.
Excellent, thank you. Right, back to the papers in general. Councillor Sangster had a question, and then I'll be going to Councillor Todd online.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Regards page 213, paragraph 129. Just talking about the communal bins, I'm assuming you're referring to the kind of bin corrals that are outside kind of blocks of flats, is that, yeah? Are you seeing a positive impact on recycling rates? Because I know probably I'm not the only elected member. All I get is continual complaints about these, because people just dump rubbish at the side of them. They dump mattresses, they dump furniture, they dump white goods, and all sorts of things. And if that's happening, what can we do to tackle that?
Chair, that's probably one of the areas we might need to go back to Housing and Community Service just to get that level of detail for you, Councillor. But certainly, as recorded in here, it is an area that, for emissions, it's an area we've been looking at. But Thomas and myself might not have the level of detail to do your question justice. So if that's okay, Chair, we would take that off table and get a note for you. Thanks, Councillor Sangster.
Okay, we'll get that in an email later on. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Todd, online. Councillor Todd, online. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Richardson online, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Maven. It's already been discussed quite a lot, but page 191.12 about the move from the vegetable oil, the HVO, back to full diesel on the diesel fleet. And obviously the downside is it has triggered an extra 2.5 tonnes of CO2 emissions. But I remember when this was coming to full council, I'm sure it was discussed at full council, and the issue was, I think that the HVO had increased substantially in price. So do either of the guys, do either of the officers, Ian, etc., would you know off the top of your head how much was actually saved by? I've looked through the papers, I've tried to find a figure in pounds, but I can't find it, guys. I'm just wondering, do you know how much was saved by moving from HVO back to full diesel in the diesel fleet?
Thanks, Chair. Is that okay to come back in? Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. So I think there is reference later on in the report to the details. It's circa £200,000 was the cost. And when, again, this was a matter that the Cabinet members also picked up on, and there was an acknowledgement, I suppose, that as much as our ambition around net zero is absolutely the strategic direction for us, it can't be at no cost. And I think the HVO and the diesel contrast was one of those areas where the Housing and Communities budget was to such an overspend position that it just wasn't sustainable and had to take that decision. But if I can find the exact reference to it, I'll point that out to you, Councillor Richardson. But yeah, it's a good point that was picked up by Cabinet members as well. Thanks.
Thanks for that answer, Ian. I mean, it's life, isn't it? I mean, we'd all like to drive the CO2 emissions down as far as we can, but in these days that we all know where we are just now. I mean, £200,000 isn't to be sniffed at. I mean, that's a sizable saving. So it's life, isn't it? It's like, what do you do? We're in this situation in local government where we're between the rock and a hard place, aren't we? So yeah. It's a difficult one, but I think as you say, Ian, a saving of £200,000, we couldn't pass up in that. Thanks for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Ian?
Chair, just when Councillor Richardson was talking there, I have found the exact reference. So paragraph 93, you'll see all of that set out there. In fact, there's a wee bit more of a description around it, and there is a section on the switch back to diesel, and it's paragraphs 91, 92 and 93, and the financial position set out at paragraph 93. In fact, it's 212,000.
212,000 saved by switching back to dirty, mucky diesel. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for
that. Councillor Todd, are you back online? You had your hand raised earlier.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And that was the issue. Just what Councillor Richardson was talking about there. It's this balance between savings, because every department needs to try and save money, but then we need to try and make the air cleaner. And again, I'll go back to the announcement about charging for electric vehicles. This is going to put a big strain on individuals. We're talking about travel to work for our employees, and there's going to be a massive impact on the decision-making process on whether they're going to buy an electric vehicle or a hybrid, or, as you say, the dirty diesel. So it's once again, it's going to be an issue regarding what do our officers do in this committee to make it attractive to still go down that route of cleaner energy and cleaner transport. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Todd. I think Colin had picked it up earlier as part of East Ayrshire Performs, and clearly that increase from the budget will have to be considered both in terms of the financial impact, but clearly in terms of our net emissions too. And that point was made, Councillor Todd, earlier. So we'll certainly be looking at that already. Yep. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Cogley.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report. And I just wanted to commend, I don't think there's anybody from education back in the room now, but I just wanted to commend the role of our education department in their work in educating our young people in all matters relating to CO2 reduction, and the raft of different measures that the schools have introduced and been working on and continue to work on, and the new ideas and initiatives that come up every year. So I think it's just important that we acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thanks. Chair, if you don't mind, could I come back on that? And I think I mentioned the cabinet, the conference that young people organise every year. It's really well received. But again, there's much more to the activity they do, all of the eco schools that we have. And I think our performance in that regard is nationally recognised as well. So thanks for those comments. We'll pass them back to education colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. And obviously it's very important we try and encourage all our young people to walk to school. Don't get a lift from mum and dad, even if they're often. Do a wee bit of exercise and walk to school. It's good for you, and it saves carbon from mum and dad's car. All great work. Mission to the moon, shoot to the stars. They're doing all these great initiatives at the schools. I've got one, page 206, paragraph 87. It's great work we've done creating green energy. We've got solar panels. I don't know if we're doing battery storage on the roof of the school. This is great work. Can we get more of this done? Is there funding we can apply for to try and get more of these green power stations on the roofs of our schools or other council buildings? I'd like to see more of it if possible.
Thanks, Chair. Again, that was a question that we got at Cabinet. So Andrew Kennedy was in the room for that meeting and gave a bit more of a detailed answer around that. It's certainly something that we have as an area of development within capital programme, and any opportunities we can for reducing our emissions by any of our infrastructure projects. And we do look at that, and Andrew gave a detailed answer around that. Perhaps it's another one we could come back to you on, Chair, with the detail that was provided at Cabinet as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Elected members, any other questions or comments? Councillor June Kyle.
Thank you. It's page 212, the 4-weekly collection system. To be honest, it suits me fine, because 3-week collection, my bucket's half empty because I recycle. Is this going to make people recycle more or less? And also, Councillor Cogley just said, if I walk into Cumnock from Homehead at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're just a bit knee deep in waste for the kids going up the street to buy their lunch. Maybe educating the kids at school, maybe help that.
We have got fantastic litter in schools programmes, and we each need to be nudging our schools to make sure they implement them. Because there's no excuse for the litter on the way in and on the way out of schools. And it's exactly the same in Galston, with the sort of litter trail between Loudon Academy and the town, and particularly now that we have a new Greggs on site, which is another bugbear. But you're absolutely right. But we should all, as elected members, be encouraging, in quite an assertive way, our schools to engage in and use the materials that we've got, because we've put a lot of money into developing the materials, so we've got the resource. So please just contact your head teachers. Ian, did you want to come back on that one as well? Yeah, I've finished on that one. Oh, David,
Chair,
you want
I was just to say, is that RBA you're referring to, Councillor Cow?
Yes.
I'll have a word with the Corporate Enforcement Unit and ask them to link him with the head teacher.
There used to be a lorry went along with 2 men, 2 hours a day, picking up this litter. I don't know whether they're still doing it or not.
Well, that's a different service, but a response should always be more than just lifting it. And as Councillor Cogley said, for many years the council's run the initiative about littering in schools and worked with the schools and developed a process which is more about restorative justice. So it's not about issuing 14-year-old or any age pupils with tickets for dropping litter. It's about trying to get them to reflect on that and pick it up and maybe go and do some litter picking as an alternative to getting an FPN. So I can't recall last time we were down in that area, but I'll ask the CEU to pick things up with the head teacher and arrange a bit of time being spent if that's what's been described in RBA.
Thank you, David. And Ian, you were wanting back in.
Chair, thanks. I think your first point, Councillor Kerr, was going to come back on as well, and it's the idea of the recycling, the food collection cycle, now the 4-week collection cycle, and the impact that that's had. Certainly, and I think we touched on this already, that the reductions we've seen, either long-term, medium-term, have been supported by the work we've done on our waste collection, moving more recycling, collecting more food waste. All of that has helped us reduce our emissions. So it's hard to pin that down exactly to just purely the 4-weekly collection cycle, but all of those parts, all of those moving parts, the variables, have contributed to the overall reduction in our emissions. And there's detail of all of that in other parts of the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, just kind of on that subject, obviously we know that the residual waste is going to change to a 4-weekly, and I'm glad to see about the food waste campaign. I think that's really important. I think though, moving forward, when we are changing this, I think we need to put out a further campaign around recycling, because there'll be a lot of people out there who will be happy to recycle. And I imagine that, we're going to get some negativity around this, but I think we'll also get some positivity. I think people genuinely do want to recycle, but I think the difficulty is that people don't know what's recyclable and what's not. So there's some things that people might think are recyclable and they'll stick it in the recycle and it's not, or other things. And are we supposed to wash out, if you get a pack of corned beef, for example, are you supposed to rinse that and wash that before you put it in your recycling? So I think it's really important that when we're changing this, that we put out another campaign so that people are aware of exactly what's recyclable and what's not.
Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Sangster. I think it was full council that considered recently the waste review, and a core part of that was a communications campaign. And I know the head of housing and communities has very much got that in mind when they're making any changes. Thanks, Councillor.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know the council was very good using their social media as well to try and reach out and do this, the awareness stuff and the education. Anything else, elected members? Councillor Lennox online, last one.
Just sorry for prolonging the meeting, Chair, but it just came to mind there that in terms of recycling, there are items which we used on a regular basis within the households within the authority, and which are not currently recycled, and I think it's be an ideal opportunity during that transition to the new system to maybe look at ways to try and get those items that we don't currently recycle introduced. And I'm thinking about things like LED light bulbs. That's one example. There's no currently a process, in my understanding, for recycling those light bulbs. You also have things that, just on a personal level, that I use a vape, and the coils from those vapes are marked with the do not throw in the waste bin. But again, there's no mechanism really for recycling those other than putting them in general waste. So I think a wee bit of scrutiny is required in terms of those miscellaneous items, if you like, that are probably currently finishing up in landfill. If we could do something about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's another area we would take back to the service. Very much complements the work they're doing on that transition with the waste review, as Councillor Lennox referred to there. So we will make sure that's passed back to Housing and Communities colleagues as well. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, elected members, we'll go back to the recommendations on the report. If there's no one else, no other comments, questions, we're at page 189, the recommendations, paragraph 2. Note the content, Council's draft public bodies climate change duties report, which is agenda 1, recognise positive progress made, implementing climate change actions, further reductions. Note the reduction waste emissions largely reflect a 69.9% decrease in greenhouse gas from waste emission sources. Note the council's total emissions reduced over 10 years. That's more than 10 years since 2012 baseline have reduced by 64%, although there's a small increase this year. Note the increase in total emissions as attributable to transport. HVO fuel, as we spoke about, was too expensive and run out of diesel fuel. Otherwise, note the contents of the report. Elected members will be happy with that. Get thumbs up online, very good. Thank you, elected members. That's the last item on the agenda for today. Thanks for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next one. If we can end recording, please.